And welcome to Empirical Education's webinar on how to turn customers' data into evidence. We're really happy you're joining us today. We know that many of you are familiar with Empirical Education, but for those of you who are not, Empirical Education has been providing education research services for more than 10 years, and our mission is to help K-12 school systems make evidence-based decisions about the effectiveness of their programs, policies, and personnel. In addition to our partnerships with school districts, research organizations, and state and federal agencies, here are just some of the publishers we've worked with over the years. I'm Jenna Zakami, Director of Research Operations at Empirical Education, and I'm joined by Andrew Jesu, our Chief Scientist. We're going to start today by presenting a needs assessment on why you should conduct research on your products and tools. As I know many of you are aware, there continues to be federal and state emphasis on accountability and research in education, and districts are really pressing for programs that demonstrate positive results for their students. There's also been an increasing availability of data on student and teacher performance. This focus has created an opportunity for education publishers and vendors that have evidence that their programs work. However, finding cost-effective yet rigorous research services centered around evidence of if your program works continues to be difficult to find. And we know that publishers and vendors are dealing with stretched marketing and evaluation budgets. The solution to this problem is Empirical Education's district data study. District data studies assist vendors in conducting quantitative case studies of their program's use and effectiveness, using historical data from schools and districts piloting a program or from veteran customers with long-standing implementation using the program. District data studies are built on efficient procedures and an engineering infrastructure and use the latest statistical approaches. These studies result in concise, publisher and practitioner-friendly reports on measurable outcomes. Results from district data studies can show evidence of increased test scores and teacher or user satisfaction with the product, and will help your customers make evidence-based decisions about continuing or expanding the use of your program. They can also help focus development dollars so that they can be used strategically for product improvement. Furthermore, results can be used in grant applications as evidence of your program's effectiveness and used for marketing efforts to demonstrate product credibility within the market by showing that you have evidence from an independent evaluator and can identify how to target sales and marketing efforts. So for example, you can take one of our reports from the district data studies and highlight the parts of the research that you feel are most marketable, and then provide that evidence to your sales and marketing department to create marketing collateral. Andrew is going to now review one of our exemplar district data studies and provide you with more information on what a district data study looks like.
Good afternoon. We're going to look at an example of a district data study involving IXL learning. IXL had partnered with the Beaverton School District to conduct this study with Empirical Education. The program being evaluated was IXL Math, which is an interactive cloud-based math practice environment that's used to support and supplement instruction. The study involved grade 4 and 5 students in 2 elementary middle schools. Now, Beaverton was selected because IXL regarded the implementation of the program in the district as strong. And this led to a productive partnership, helping to facilitate some of the critical processes that are needed, such as collecting and merging data from Beaverton with the IXL learning logs. In the next few slides, we're going to look at examples of the kinds of questions that district data studies can address. We will use results from the IXL study as an example. The first kind of question that district data studies address is the question of whether the use of the program is associated with higher performance. In the case of IXL, the question was, do students in IXL math classrooms perform better on the OAKS math test than comparable students who were not in IXL math classrooms? The OAKS, by the way, is the Oregon State test. And what we found was that students in IXL classes perform better on the OAKS test. The result is represented in the graph on the right. Performance on OAKS is measured along the vertical scale, and we see that the bar representing IXL performance is higher than the bar for the comparison group. Also, the 95% confidence interval, which is at the top of the IXL blue bar clears the top of the bar for the comparison group. And this is a way to represent the fact that the difference between the IXL and comparison groups is unlikely to result or be the result of chance alone. In other words, we're seeing a real difference in the performance between the two groups. The second kind of question that district data studies can be designed to address is whether certain kinds of students benefit more from the program than other kinds of students. In the case of IXL, we pose the question this way. Is there a difference between 4th and 5th grade in the impact of IXL on Oak's math achievement? And from the graph, we see a greater impact in 5th grade. The IXL group outperforms the comparison group in both grades, but the difference is greater in 5th grade. Also, we see that the confidence interval clears the bar for the comparison group in 5th grade, but not in 4th grade. What this implies is that the difference in 4th grade can easily be attributed to chance variation, while the difference in 5th grade is much more likely to be a real difference. That is not one that could easily arise from chance alone. So this kind of question and result can help IXL to show with evidence that their product is especially well geared for certain types of students. It's also useful for internal research and development and can guide further refinement of the product so that it can meet the needs of subgroups of students who have not yet received the full benefit of the program. In the case of IXL, in addition to looking at differences in program effectiveness associated with grade, we also examine differences based on gender, ethnicity, disability status, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and whether a student was classified as talented or gifted. The third type of question that district data studies can be built around has to do with whether greater use of the program is associated with higher achievement. In the case of IXL, we ask, are differences in IXL math usage associated with differences in student performance? To address this question, we measure usage of the program in terms of several metrics listed in the left-hand column. And we found a positive association between several of the usage measures and student performance. This result can help IXL to identify how much a program needs to be used in order to see an impact. This, in turn, can help with further development of the program and with training in the use of the program. The fourth type of question that a district data study addresses has to do with teachers' perceptions of program implementation. So in the case of IXL, we asked, do teachers perceive changes in students' attitudes towards math since using IXL math? Here we asked about students' enjoyment of learning math, confidence in using math, students' levels of effort, and their preparedness for the standardized test. This type of result can help the program developers to check their hunches and theories about how the program is working, whether it's having its intended results, including achievement of objectives that lead to results of value, such as increased achievement. I want to reiterate that district data studies are a joint effort on the part of the program developer, the participating district, and Empirical. Critical to a district data study is the idea of an implicit design. And what this means is that a program is being deployed in the district in a way that allows us to make the necessary comparisons of outcomes in order to support inferences concerning a program's impact. And over the next few slides, what we will do is look at several implementation scenarios that allow us to leverage the data to get answers to the kinds of questions we've been discussing. So implementation scenario 1 supports a comparison group study. In this case, the program is being piloted in a fraction of the schools in the district, and this allows us to compare the performance of program users to program non-users to infer the impact of a program. An especially useful way to roll out the program is to pilot the program with a random subset of schools, which actually gives us an experimental comparison, yielding a highly valid result. Embedding an experiment this way in the rollout of the program gives a result that is often considered a gold standard for accuracy. The second implementation scenario is a pre-post study. Here, all the schools in the district are starting the implementation at the same time, but data are available for the same schools and usually many of the same students in the period prior to the introduction of the program. Sometimes we have performance data for several years prior to the start of the implementation of the program, as well as for several years after the start of implementation. This scenario allows us to compare performance from before to after the program is being implemented to assess the impact of the program. The third type of implementation scenario involves looking at the correlation between the levels of use of the program and achievement. In this case, we would need for there to be some variation in the extent to which the program is used so that we can establish the correlation. Now, underlying the analysis of outcomes for all three implementation scenarios are methods that use statistical controls that are intended to increase the accuracy of the results concerning program efficacy. That is, the method attempts to control for the effects of factors other than the program that may be confounded with the use of the program and that can influence the results. By doing so, we can better isolate the effect of just the program. We want it separated away from all the other things that may have an influence. So one question that may occur to you is whether or not district data studies can be considered scientific. So as Jenna mentioned, there is an urgency to have evidence-based and data-driven results in decision-making. The methods used with district data studies meet several important industry standards. For example, they are consistent with the Software Information Industry Association's guidelines and considerations for product evaluation. Also, implementation scenario 1, which involved comparing program recipients to controls, may qualify for What-Works Clearinghouse review and subsequently may meet What-Works Clearinghouse evidence standards with reservations. In the special case where schools are randomly assigned, for example through a lottery, to receive the program earlier or to get it later so that a comparison can be made between the two groups, the study may meet What-Works Clearinghouse standards even without reservation, which is the highest level of a rating that it can receive. All of the scenarios can qualify as initial evidence for purposes of the U.S. Department of Education. In the event that you are thinking, for example, of proposing a study to the U.S. Department of Education, the department usually requires some initial studies that show the program's promise to achieve specific outcomes, such as increased student achievement, before funding can be received. So the implementation scenarios and corresponding studies that we have described would qualify for this purpose. Jenna, back to you.
There are a few things to consider when asking if a district data study is right for you. The first thing to consider is if you have a district that you've been working with strong product implementation by several teachers or users, and if you think that district would be willing to share their student achievement and other demographic data. If possible, you should also identify if there's a group of comparable students within that district or school that is not using the program, and think about what specific outcome measures would be of most interest to you and to the participating district. If your program includes a software component and you're interested in examining the relationship between usage and student performance, like the IXL study did, consider the feasibility of merging the data from your software system to the data from the district. So for example, if your system uses state or district student IDs, that would make linking the data with the district data relatively easy. You should also consider if your program is targeted towards special populations of students. For example, if your program is being used by all students in a school or a district who are below grade level in reading proficiency, we may not be able to identify an appropriate group of students to compare them to. Or if your program is geared for students in kindergarten through second grade, identifying an outcome measure might be difficult since those grades typically don't administer state or standardized tests. And if your program is targeted towards particular populations of students that tend to be highly mobile, it may be difficult to acquire the appropriate data and to track progress. But we're happy to think through and discuss these considerations as well as other considerations specific to your needs, and we encourage you to take advantage of our offer of a free one-on-one consulting meeting. Please contact Robin, our marketing manager, to set up a consulting meeting. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today and learning more about how a district data study can help you. And we will now welcome any questions that you may have, or if you'd like us to review anything presented in the webinar. And we ask again that if you do have questions, if you could send a private chat to us through the chat feature in the WebEx, and we'll do our best to address those. So one question that came up here is, what happens if the district data study shows that our product doesn't work? That's a really good question, and actually goes right to a point about distributing the report. Reports are provided to both you and to the participating districts, but we don't publish the report unless you both agree to make it public. Another question here is, can empirical education do a district data study with existing information that we have already collected, or do we have to start a new project? That's a really great question, and district data studies are designed to use historical data collected from both the district and from your system, if you have a software system, for example. So if the data that were collected were the appropriate student achievement and demographic measures that we would need to address the specific research questions that you have, that is possible. We may have to consider certain agreements that the districts may have in terms of you sharing that information with us, but that's certainly something that we can discuss. It also brings up the point of, because district data studies do use historical data, so data that's already been collected either by you or by the district, we are able to conduct the analyses and prepare the report with the results that you need fairly quickly. So while other research, say through a U.S. Department of Education grant or contract, may take a year plus to actually get any results, the district data studies are designed to provide the results fairly quickly, and assuming we have all of the data that we need, we can actually turn around the report within a few months. But again, to address your specific question, we would need to discuss a little bit further in terms of what data you have collected already and what your specific research questions would be, just to ensure that we would have all of the appropriate information. And the next question here asks, you seemed hesitant about district data studies being eligible for WWC. Why? Andrew, can you address that question?
Sure. That's a good question. The intention was not to sound hesitant, but to qualify the kinds of review that What Works Clearinghouse can do, and the type of designs that, in fact, we would be conducting through a district data study. There are two things here. One is that the What Works Clearinghouse, first of all, in order to review a study, usually is selective about the kinds of topic areas and domains that they will review. So even if you had a stellar design, they may not review the study if it doesn't fall within their within the particular domains that they're interested in. A second point is that in terms of meeting evidence standards, What Works Clearinghouse sets the highest standard, that is meeting evidence standards without reservation for randomized controlled trials only at this point. And so in order to receive a rating of meeting evidence standards, period, that is without reservation, we would have to do a randomized trial, which usually takes longer. It's something we do, but it's kind of outside of the profile of a district data study, which is much more quick, immediate, using historical data. That said, the first scenario that I reviewed, the design scenario, the comparison group study, is exactly one that the What Works Clearinghouse does review. At best, it would be able to receive a ranking of meeting evidence standards with reservations, simply because lack of randomization limits to some extent the level of validity evidence that we can get, internal validity evidence that we can get. And in order for it to meet What Works Clearinghouse standards with reservations, there are a few additional conditions that have to be met before the study can qualify for that stamp of approval, including that we would need to show that the treatment and comparison group are very similar in terms of baseline characteristics, usually the pretest measure that's used in the assessment. They have some other criteria that they use as well. For example, the assessments cannot be over-aligned with the intervention, and they look at a few other design issues as well to make sure that that they're sound. So it's not so much a hesitation as it is a qualification in terms of what we may be able to do in sending district data studies forward to Wetworks Clearinghouse review.
It looks like that was the last question. But again, if any of you have particular questions that you'd like us to address, please feel free to contact Robin, our marketing manager, and we can certainly set up a meeting. It looks like some also asked for some additional information, given us their information, so we will certainly reach out and contact you to set up another meeting. Again, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today, and we hope that this was valuable information for you, and we look forward to potentially partnering with you.